So last class we just discussed about the theoretical part, but we need to understand the API structure and so what you will give in the API. When you are hitting the API, what are the things you will provide? So that we need to understand. And then we have to understand one more concept, authorization and authentication. That's another very important point, security point of view. It's a very important. So what is no different roles of parameters, headers in REST API design? So even the authorization and authentication also a part of this headers. So basically, let me draw one picture. So when you send a request, what you need to send? When you get a response, what you will get it? So that is a very important to understand that. So the structure of API is you open a IntelliJ. So this is the crucial step. Please catch this. Okay. Anyhow, let's open this. Okay. So just so when you send a request parameters. So request section, what will be there? So request section, first, these are the methods, HTTP methods. Okay. Then your URL will start like this, HTTP or HTTPS colon, basically the URL. Okay. So the endpoint URL. So first base URL will be there. So post.com/endpoint URL. Okay. So then below in the request body, you have a parameters. So the parameters are query parameters are there, path parameters are there, two types. So one is query parameters. Query means you are searching. Query parameters are used for searching something. That's a query parameter. The query parameter indicates like this question mark, and then it's a key value pair. So the endpoint URL here itself it starts. So here itself it starts. In the endpoint URL example is like this. For example, question mark search keyword equal to suppose selenium. So this is the query parameter. Query parameter always comes key and value. And if you have one more, you will just add ampersand. So then one more you can add. Like that, multiple query parameters also an endpoint can contain. So an endpoint can contain. Okay. So that's the query parameters means. And second one, there is a path parameters. Either you can give query parameters or path parameters, or without these two also your endpoint URL might be available. So what is path parameter? A path parameter is basically it will be available in the URL itself. So it will be available in the URL. So like this, for example, you want ID. Based on ID, you want to get that resource. Suppose you have multiple users in the Gmail, right? Particular user has some ID. Every user has one ID, unique ID. That ID you want to fetch it. Only that user details you want. Then this is the path parameters. So you will give like this, path parameters. This is called path parameters. And this is called query parameters. Okay, so you got the difference? Okay. If it is a get call, it will be like this. Let me show you, there is a post call. And even you can have a headers also. So headers will be there. So in the headers, so you will give how you want to send your request. So like accept. This is again a key value pair. So application generally will send in the JSON format or text format or HTML format or XML format. Any format your REST API will accept. Then content type, application JSON. Okay, so this is how you will send a headers. Sometimes you will send even authorization also in the headers. Authorization and authentication means, so first let's understand authentication. Authentication means who you are, the identity of you is called authentication. Like you are logging with the username, password. That is your authentication. If you give proper username and password, you are authenticated. Your identity is authenticated. So that's the authentication. Then what is authorization? Okay, you authenticated. Then what you can access, what you cannot access, that is called authorization. You are authorized to use this resource. You can do these many actions on this resource. That is called authorization. That means permission to do, whether you have a permissions to perform that action, like you want to create. Do you have a permission? If you don't have a permission, there are some status codes that you will get unauthorized. That means you don't have authorization. So that is the one you can mention here, authorization. There will be a token. So you will specify there are different tokens will be there. Bearer token, basic auth token, OAuth 2.0, HAG token. So there are different types of authorizations we can provide. So that is the another one in the request header. This is all I am talking about, the request headers. If it is a post and put call, okay, if it is a post and put call, you will get extra here. So apart from this headers, there will be one more part, request body. That means what input you want to use to create that resource. So request body means, suppose you are logging into a Facebook, you want to create an account. So what you will give? You will give an input data, right? So username, password, like your first name, last name, and your mobile number, all the data you will provide. That is called input data. That is called request body. Okay. So the request body means the input data you will provide for this method. It will create with that data. Then you will get a response. So And this one, that is the request section. Then there is a response section. Response section. So you will get a response body. And then you will get here status code. So status codes are 200 series, 300 series, 400 series, 500 series. So I just want, I should not put like that. Series I will keep. This is how you will specify series. It can be anything, okay? 200 series, 300 series, 400 and 500 series. So I'll discuss again in detail, but first understand the get call, how it will be, okay? So let me remove. Get and put calls will be like this. So you will just give endpoint URL. The method is get method and the URL. Then you will provide either query parameters or path parameters. Then your headers. So these headers you will provide. So, and then you will get a response. You will get a response. So in the response, the data will be available. So then you with the response, you will get a status code. 200, 300, 400 or 500, whatever it is. So we'll discuss what is 200, what is 300, what is 400, 500. I'll discuss in detail. Then for post and put methods, so I already told you yesterday. So a simple example is you have an Aadhaar card. By mistakenly they made a mistake and you want to correct it. Then you will walk into the any store, right? Government e-store, and you will provide your Aadhaar card. That's the ID. There is Aadhaar card has a ID. They will log into that ID and they will modify it. That is called put method. Put is for update. Update the details like your first name, last name, or your address, something you want to update. That's the put methods. Again, you have to give the data, right? What you are giving for update, you have to give the, so the URL, the endpoint URL you will give, and then there will be ID. So your ID card has some ID, and all the details, what you want to update. That request body you need to provide in the response like this in the JSON response. So JSON response will be so like this. First name. So both in the strings I am giving, comma, last name. PH. So like this you can provide. So and address. So and so data you will provide here. Okay. So this is the all the data you will provide in the it's not coming. Okay. So this is the data you will provide, then you will get a response whether it is updated or not with the latest data. So this is the how the request section and how the response section. So request and you will get a response also. So with the same status codes you will get. So that I will explain in the Postman, but let's understand this. What is authorization and authentication? So we will understand, okay? So let's go there. Okay. It's, right. So now let's understand authentication and authorization. Authentication is who you are. So authentication process, the identity of the user is checked to provide access to the system. First, if you want to log in to your system also, you will give your username, right? That's the authentication. So this process verifies who you are. So the user needs to supply login details to authenticate. That's the authentication. Then what is authorization? So authorization is the process of verifying if the authenticated user is authorized to access specific information or be allowed to execute a certain operation or not. So this process determines which permission the user has, what he can do after authentication. So that is called authorization. So authorization is what you can do after authentication. So that is the authentication and authorization. Any questions here before moving on? So these are the query parameters, path parameters, headers. First understand what is a resource means. As I mentioned, a resource in the REST API is a unique identifier of a data object that can be accessed and manipulated through the API using a set of all the rules I have mentioned in the previous, so in the slide. So what is URI? REST API URI. URI means Uniform Resource Identifier. Uniform Resource Identifier. So the protocol is used to access the resource such as HTTP or HTTPS. Just now I have shown you that. So HTTP means what? What is meant by HTTP? Anybody having idea?
Hypertext Transfer Protocol.
Yeah, so Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTTPS means Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secured. So that's a security one, and another one is without security. So that is the protocols you are going to use before sending the request. The host. So which host you are requesting? The host is nothing but a server where your data resides. So that server you are hitting with a request. So that's a host. The host specifies the domain name or IP address of the server that hosts the resources. Resource is nothing but a data object. Please catch all these points. You always talks about resources. So how you can access that resource? So that resource you can access using HTTP verb methods, endpoint URLs, then headers, request headers, path parameters or query parameters. Then you will get a response back, and then this server will send the response back. And even you will use some port also. The port specifies the network port number used for the communication. So there are so many, right? Okay, this host is listening to which port? So that port number also you will give when you are testing locally. So, but generally in the production related data, you don't need to give this port. Like you will give directly twitter.com or facebook.com. You can eat directly like that. You don't need a port. Port is only when you are locally testing that APIs, you need to use host, then port you will give. Then slash endpoint URL. So that's the how you will test. Then port after resource path. Okay, where is this resource? So the path specifies the location of the resource within the server's file system. Okay, in the server's file system hierarchy, where this resource is available. That is what the path I mentioned is post.com slash endpoint URL I told, right? That is the resource path. Then, so it is typically included after the host and the port and separated from the previous parts by a forward slash symbol. How will you know? Separate by a forward slash symbol. Let me show you that. So this is the host, and this is the protocol, and this is the base URL, and then this is the endpoint URL. So this is how you will give your endpoint URL will be. So this is the get method. So then you are passing parameters, first name optional, last name optional, check-in optional, checkout optional. So, and the status you will get a 200. Then you will get a response like this. So this is the how you will, you are just hitting this with a get method. The get method will retrieve the data in this server. This booking, how many bookings are there, all will be retrieved by this get method, and the response you will get like this. That is the get method purpose. Get is always you are getting the data, retrieving the information, retrieving the resource information. That's a get call. And so parameters, as I mentioned, query parameters or path parameters provide additional information about the request. So what these parameters will do, they will provide additional information about the request, such as search filters, pagination details, point to a specific resource within a collection. So these parameters are used. So this is how you can write. I mentioned very clearly here, protocol like HTTP or HTTPS colon base URL plus
Yeah.
resource path slash
Query
query
parameter.
parameters. So this is the best syntax of your REST API endpoint structure. REST API endpoint structure. So below is the example. See how clearly mentioned. So protocol, host, port, /c forward slash. So this host and port after application context. So endpoint URL starts here. Then the version, which version of this endpoint? Then slash resource. This is the resource, main resource. This is the path. So path, resource path you are giving. Users folder inside. Okay, which user? Particular. This is the path parameter. So in this users collection, you are fetching particular user ID details. That's the how you can give path parameters. Path parameters will be in the URL itself you will give. Okay, so that is the path parameters. If your API is expecting any parameters, then you must pass those parameters as part of your request. So we have two types of parameters, path parameters and query parameters. So what is path parameter? This is another very important interview question. Please pay attention. So path parameters means variable part of the URL path. See, this is the path parameter, the variable which is part of the your request URL. Okay, that's what I'm talking about here. Variable part of the URL path. These are embedded in the URL path of the request. Embedded means combinedly you will get that in the URL itself. So let me show you here example. Get particular booking. So this is the one, the path parameter. Okay, so that's the example for path parameter. So path parameters are used to point to a specific resource within a collection of resources. So I hope you all know collections. Everybody knows a group of objects, right? So a group of objects in a single entity. That's a
Entity.
collection. So path parameters are part of the URL only. Path parameters are part of the URL only. This is the path parameter. Okay. So get all the books in these books. Okay. Get 2324 book. That every book has an ID. Otherwise, how you will identify that? So that's why every book has one ID. I am giving that ID. Here 2324 is the path parameter that identify the specific book by its unique Q identifier. So that's the path parameters. The server uses it to retrieve the corresponding book from a database. Path parameters are a simple and intuitive way to pass data to the REST API. They are widely used in the real world APIs. Next, query parameters. See, query. What is meant by query?
Searching,
Searching.
searching.
You are searching. You are searching, okay? In that a bunch of objects, particular object you want. So that is the query parameter. So query parameter is a way to pass additional information to a server by appending it to the end of the URL. Query parameters are typically used to filter, sort, pagination, a list of resources written by the server. So why you will use these query parameters? These query parameters are used to filter, sort, paginate a list of resources. So these query parameters are used. So query parameters are written like that. See, get method slash books question mark author. So this author and limit to 10. So this author, with this author, there are 10 books you return to me. I'm telling, I'm not unique giving one book ID. That's the path parameter. If you give one book ID, that's a path parameter. But I'm not doing that. I am getting a bunch of objects or resources based on my query parameter. That's the query parameters. Okay. So here the author and the limit. See, this author and the limit are the query parameters. The server can use this information to filter the list of books by the specified author and limit the number of books returned to 10. See, very, very clearly and readable statements are there. So please catch that. Okay. So query parameters are indicated in a URL by adding a question mark. See, this is the question mark. Question mark after immediately your query parameter will be there. Query parameter key and value. Key and value. Okay, so this value always you can change. You can change this. But these are query parameter name for this resource, books resource. Okay. So query parameters are indicated in a URL by adding a question mark after the base URL, followed by one or more key value pairs separated by ampersand. Query parameters are easy to use and understand. So simple key value format. So next, headers are cookies. Headers and cookies are the mechanism for sending additional and metadata information along with the request or response. You will get these headers. There is a request headers and response headers also. They provide information such as the content type, authentication credentials, cache control, what are all you are sending. The headers are represented as a key value pairs in the HTTP request and HTTP response. So that's the headers and cookies. The final conclusion is, so every API you will send like this. The client will send the request to the server, and server will send the response. See, you can send in this format. See, you can send in this format. See, your request URL, then the query parameter, so the endpoint and the parameters. So then you will response will send back. So either JSON format or HTML format or XML format, any format. So which format you send, and the same format you will receive. Mainly REST APIs, RESTful Web Services, REST APIs, you will work with the JSON only. JavaScript object notation, it's a lightweight data format. So what are the different data formats we have? So JSON, XML, ML. So these are the different data formats you can use. Even text format also you can send. So there is no restriction. So these are the very important concepts. Sorry. Yeah. So that's the request. So syntax. See, HTTPS host resource. See, verb plus URL. The verbs are HTTP request verbs are get, post, put, delete. So let me explain again what is a get method. If anybody asks you what you need to tell, it retrieves the information from the server. Get retrieves the information from the server. Post, you're posting, you're creating. The post is used to create the resource, create the data on the server or in the server. So put method is used to update the data, and delete, it delete the resource from the server. So these are very, then what is the difference between post and put? Post is used to create the resource. What you will give an input for the post. For get and delete, you don't need to give input. Request body, you don't need to provide. As I clearly mentioned, get, you don't need a request body. You will give only the method, endpoint URL, and headers. That's it. No request body. But for post, you have to give the method, post method, and the endpoint URL. Then request the headers you have to give, and the request body, the input, what data you need to provide to create the data, create the resource. So that request body is mandatory for post and put. Get and delete, you don't need a request body, but remaining others will be there, headers will be there, and authentication, authorization you can give. That's the post and put difference. Post is used to create the resource. Put is used for update the same resource, existing resource. So there is one more patch. What is the difference between put and patch? Put also will update existing resource. Patch also will update, but partial updation you can do. Only in the request body, particular field you want to update, you can do with the patch. Patching, like right, road patching, right? So if there are dents in the road, only they will repair only that part. That's a patching. Put is entire thing you will repair. That's the put and patch difference. Put and patch both will be used for the repair only, the modification. But put will update entire body or whatever the fields you have to provide while giving, you have to give entire body. But per patch, only in the response, in the request body, only one field you can give. Which field you want to update? Only that field you can give. For example, my last name has a mistake. So I can give in the curly bracket last name equal to give proper, which one you want to update for that unique ID. So that's the only particular field. But for put, you have to give my first name, last name, address, everything I have to give. Even though if you don't change, so that's the difference between put and patch. So put is you have to give entire data. Patch is only specific parameter you can modify. That's the difference between put and patch. But both will update. Okay. So then URI means I already told unified resource identifier. So a sequence of characters that identifies the web resource by a location, name, or both in the World Wide Web. World Wide Web is a W3C, W3. So World Wide Web means unique ID will be there to identify the resource. So URL means so unified resource locator. So unified like this. This is the unified resource locator. So that's the URI and URL difference. So URI is a resource identifier. URL is the resource locator. So superset of URL, this URI is the superset of URL, and URL is the type of URI. So URI is often utilized in XML